Hey, this is Chris Moyer. Um, I was just browsing through some old papers and I came across a journal that I wrote, a journal entry from 2005, where I was really struggling with the good and evil dichotomy within myself and my understanding of how both of those things affect me, my view of God. I just would just like to read part of my journal here. Maybe some of you can relate. You want to do good, but you find that you're always thinking of evil things, or your thoughts. You get these thoughts in your head that don't seem to be from you, but you can't stop focusing on them. Um, so I hope that maybe you can relate with this journal entry. Sometimes I scare myself. I know my potential, both for good or evil. Of course, I always want the good, but sometimes I feel powerless to choose it. Like there is some force within me that draws me towards that which is ultimately not in my best interest. I am very caught up in the good evil dichotomy. I don't know why this is. It could be because I take sermons to heart and beat myself down as a worthless sinner with no hope for any purpose or value apart from the incredible grace and mercy of God. It could be that I have taken to heart the idea that innately, by virtue of being born into a humanity that is inherently sinful, I deserve by all rights to be thrown into hell and tortured there forever and ever. This is not a light thing to ponder, and I dare say the more one delves into this good-evil dichotomy, the further into madness they will fall. Or not. Perhaps it is only certain sensitive persons who have difficulty comprehending a loving God, who would throw his disobedient children into hell that suffer from this dilemma. Many preachers and lay people may not suffer mental anguish when they could consider the possibility of an all-loving, benevolent deity tossing unbelieving children into hell. I sometimes fear that fate for certain of my loved ones, and yes, even for myself. Sometimes I look at my life and it appears two different ways to me. Number one, I am a selfish person with grandiose delusions that appear noble and good, but in the end are only seeking to glorify myself and not God. Who am I to declare myself a prophet of God? And indeed, in other, even more grandiose manic episodes, I have even claimed to be God and the Antichrist and the Trinity at other times in my life. And number two, I am a good man with a good heart and a mind that has been ravaged by bipolar disorder. I have done a lot of good in my life. Every time I ever went to the psychiatric hospital, I shared and preached Christ to others. Although on some occasions I did this rather provocatively and angered a few people. I have led two people to the Lord by saying the sinner's prayer with them, and I even talked another man out of suicide and convinced him to rededicate his life to the Lord. Who knew if I made a positive impact on other people? So there you have it. The two sides of me. The selfish side who is arrogant and acts and thinks sometimes he is God, and the more selfless person who generally desires to help people. So which one am I? I can't be both, or can I? It feels as though my life has become fragmented. I don't know who I am anymore, and that scares the crap out of me. The last hospitalization at Telecare in El Dorado, which lasted 2 weeks, besides being a complete blur, revealed some not too complimentary things about myself. I recall standing outside on the concrete with steel and chain links surrounding me on all sides, pretty graffiti on the ground, with positive sayings all written in chalk above me on the steel beams. Thinking I was God the Father, believing the actual sun in the sky to be Jesus Christ, I stood with my arms outstretched to the sun and yelled out as loud as I could, "Jesus, save me! Save your father in the mental ward!" Or something to that effect. Oh, the arrogance and pride. How could the Lord ever look on me with favor again after seeing and hearing me say those things? Why did I think Jesus Christ was the Son? I felt my prayer would bring about Armageddon, as well as the plagues, for example, in Revelation, where the sun scorched the earth with heat and billions are in writhing pain. I thought my prayers had that kind of strength. Might it not be possible to be too confident in our prayers? Even the structure of my language, I think, has been affected by the last episode. I am not, or at least I do not believe myself to be manic, but I tend to write tangentially. In other words, there is an overall structure to my writing. There is no overall structure to my writing. I just sort of meander from one idea to another, kind of like brainstorming, I guess. Brainstorming might be an effective way for the writer to get out his or her thoughts, but oftentimes it leaves the reader feeling lost. I want to go back to the Good Evil Dichotomy because there are volumes to be said here. I find it funny that the Bible says that you should not care what other men think of you. Now, of course, there are several different ways to take that statement. For example, oftentimes society's reactions to our public lives tell us whether we are on the right track or not. If we focus on loving and serving others in both our public and private lives, society's response to us will normally reflect that. If we treat others with kindness and respect, we are not likely to be deemed by society as a cruel and harsh person. People will speak good things about us because we have acted in such a way to merit such praise. This is not to say we do the act and feign kindness in order to be praised by our fellow men and women. Perhaps this false shadow of kindness and humility is what Christ was so railed about with the Pharisees. In another sense, the Bible strikes a chord by suggesting you shouldn't worry about what other men think. Your first priority should be what God thinks. This way, if culture or society become corrupt, you will not become corrupt with it in an attempt to win the favor of a dishonorable society. So that was written actually in 2015, and I'm still struggling with that a little bit, but for the most part I've overcome the feeling of being subject to wild thoughts or speculations. But if you're bipolar or schizophrenic or have wild thoughts, it gets better. Like I've been taking my medication now for, this is the very first time I was diagnosed bipolar back in 1998, but it hasn't really been until the last 3 or 4 years that I've been really diligent at taking the medication, and it has helped a lot. I've still had some episodes believing I was God. Actually, the last episode was crazy. It was crazy, and I was still taking the meds, but I sensed this evil presence within me, and at one point I was convinced that I was Lucifer, and another time I thought I was God. And I don't know if that's because of something that I'm causing in myself or if it's just my condition, but I would really like to keep my sanity from here on out. So I've started being a little bit more friendly at Taco Bell where I work, trying to bring up trying to create a personal connection with people that come into Taco Bell and make them feel good about themselves. But I know in the past, every time I've gotten super outgoing, it's usually always led to another manic episode where I think I'm a prophet from God. And I definitely don't want to do that anymore. So I just need to be very careful about being friendly, just not being too overtly spiritual or religious at work. I think you can have a solid faith and a dynamic faith without it resorting to losing your boundaries and getting in people's faces and turning people off to God. And I've done that a lot in the history of my life, is I've turned people off to God because I've been too much in your face. I'm just kind of airing my thoughts here. I don't know if anyone's watching this, but if the journal entry struck you, or if you want to hear more about my story, you can go to my webpage, bipolarchristian.net. I've written a lot on there about my experiences through the years with bipolar, well, I'm actually schizoaffective is the actual diagnosis. But I write a lot about spirituality. I write a lot about God. I write a lot about my struggles with Christianity. But There are times when I really doubted God. Now I'm more okay. Well, anyway, I will add to this video another time. Have a blessed day.